Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Hello, Libration Nation. We are going back in time to the 18th century and discussing amatory fiction in Eliza Haywood's Fantomina. This incredible story explores the complexity of identity and desire through the story of a young woman who adopts multiple personas to navigate the intricacies of romantic entanglements in 18th century society. My guest this week is the absolutely lovely Samantha DeShazo. Samantha was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. She earned her MA in English at VCU in 2022, where she studied literature of the long 18th century. She's an educator who currently works with first-year college students, and when she's not working, she can be found with her nose in a book or pampering her beloved dog, Henry. Our drink this week was also courtesy of Samantha. We decided that young ladies like Fantomina were probably drinking tea. So our drink this week comes from the Spice and Tea Exchange of Richmond. It is a creme Earl Grey black tea. It was absolutely delicious. And I want to thank Samantha again for sharing it with me. And then she gave me a little extra to keep and enjoy that week. So I really loved it. All right, one last thing before we get started. If you're loving the show, hit that subscribe button, like and share with a friend this week. I really appreciate it, and it helps me grow. All right, let's get to it. What kind of tea is this? Why don't you
So I go to the Spice and Tea Exchange in Carytown.
Oh, cool.
And they have a bunch of different teas. They have so many varieties, and I'll go to refresh. I'll try a new tea every once in a while. But this is one of my favorites. It's on rotation. It's called Lady Grey a la Creme Black Tea. It's got lavender, lemon, orange, and creme infused with the traditional Earl Grey. And it's great. Kind of tastes like Fruit Loops, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a good vibe.
Absolutely.
To talk about some Haywood.
Absolutely. I'm not going to drink it just yet because I'm going to let it cool, but yeah, it smells so good, like Fruit Loops, like you said. And we were trying to figure out the drink, and I was just like, let's be honest, people in Fantomina's time, like the women, were probably not making fancy cocktails.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And then you were like, great news, I have all of these amazing teas. So it came out perfect.
It did.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna really set the tone.
Yes.
I think.
Okay, so let's jump in. So Fantomina, who were you when you first picked up this story?
I was 20 years old. I was going into my introduction to the English major class. Before then, I kind of switched to English because I wanted to be a writer, and I thought just English was like the best way to get there. I always planned on getting an MFA, but then I took this class, and I was doing a lot better in it than I thought I was. At the time, I was not a very good student. I had undiagnosed ADHD, and so I was really struggling, and I thought I was the problem. But then I got into this class, and I was doing really well, and I was, like, getting good grades, and everything was kind of turning around, and I was like, oh my gosh, is this, like, my calling? And so it was the last book that we read. I was a little bit scared because it was published in 1725. The language is a little bit less accessible than a lot of the texts we were reading, but I read it and I got it, and I was like highlighting things and writing things down, and I was like, this is so cool. I cannot believe that people, 300 years ago were going through all this, and it just really spoke to me, and the language really spoke to me. I read this book, so after my introduction to the English major class, I kept taking classes that were focused on 18th century texts, especially 18th century women writers, and then I loved it so much that I ended up going to grad school, getting an MA in English, and that was my primary focus, and so I absolutely just loved it. I've read Fantomina For school, for pleasure, probably 20 times. And
Really?
I always find something new every single time I read it.
Wow.
There's so much depth. There's so much layers to what's going on, to like the historical context, to the language itself. And so there's just always something new to experience with it. The only other books that I've read that are similar are like Toni Morrison. Same wave with language, same layers, same complexity. Also like Frankenstein. Always learn something new every time I read Frankenstein. So it was just like figuring out a puzzle with all the different turns of phrase, the grammar, the way things are set up. It's like you're digging into a mystery almost and trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Wow. That is so interesting. I love that it kind of pulled you into this world that you're now like just totally immersed in, and that this was like your entree into where you are now. That's really cool. Okay, so we have to tell the listeners, who is Fantomina?
Great question. So the very short answer is we don't actually ever know who Fantomina is. Should I give a brief, plot synopsis?
Absolutely.
Okay, essentially the novel starts off, it's a very short novel.
How many pages are we looking at here?
Brought it with me. It's about 77 pages in total. It's very short, very quick to the point. It starts off with a young woman. We never find out what her name is. And I think that's a very intentional choice by Eliza Haywood, because this story is about intrigue, disguise, coming up with a bunch of different strategies. It's about performance. And so I think it's very intentional that, this girl is very interested, given the historical context of keeping her reputation intact, not letting anyone know that she's going out, that she has a lover, that she's interested in pursuing romance or sex. And so we never actually find out her name. She's just a young woman. And then she goes to a playhouse one night. She is up, with the other ladies, very separated from the rest of the crowd. The men are down at the bottom enjoying the play. Down there, there's women selling oranges. There's a lot of things going on. There's also sex workers down there. That's where they go to engage with men, to meet people. And so she sees the sex workers interacting with the men, and she's seeing these men that she's had social interactions with because she's a high-born, high-class lady. There's a certain way that the men are acting towards her that she's noticing that there's a real difference to how they're interacting with these women.
Okay.
And so she becomes really curious, and she's, what are these men talking about with them? And, she's talking to the other women around her, and I'm thinking, probably a lot of them either are old enough to know what's going on, or they just don't have that same curiosity that she has. So she decides, I'm going to find out what men talk about with these women. And so she goes to the playhouse the next night, and she takes on the appearance of a sex worker. She pretends like she's one of them. And, flocks of men come to her because, she's beautiful, she's accomplished, she's intriguing, she's also very young. We never get an age for her, but she's definitely a teenager, probably 14, 15, 16. So she's very young.
Oh my God.
And this is not...
I'm like, I have a 10-year-old.
Yes.
I'm like, no.
Yeah, no, it's very, very much of the time. I can give a background if...
Oh, I would love that. Oh, yeah, 100%. Let's do it.
So essentially, during this time period, there's the law of coverture. So basically that means that a woman is either femme sole, that means that she's legally separated, she's either a young single woman or she's a widow. As soon as she gets married, she becomes a femme covert, and essentially that means that legally she does not have her own separate identity. Her rights are covered by her husband. So all of her property goes to him. She can't, bring a suit to court without him there. It's a very restrictive time period. Also, the sexual dynamics between men and women at this time are very rigid. Basically, women are not supposed to want sex. They're supposed to be very reluctant. There's this really high value placed on virginity. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we're under primogeniture, so all the property is going to the first son. So it's really important that we know who that dad is to make sure that, there's no theft of property, anything like that. And so in order to make sure, because, there's no paternity tests.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that the women are very restricted, very sexually secluded, that virginity has such a high price on it. That is where your value lies if you're a young woman. Mm-hmm. Having your virginity. Of course, this is going to matter a lot more to a woman who is from a very wealthy family. As we're going to see later in the novel, the young women who are lower class, who are working class, they're not going to have the same restrictions, but they're also not going to have the same protections. Mm-hmm. So Fantomina is coming into this world where she is not allowed to actively pursue this sexual desire that she has. Mm. Instead, she has to come up with different scenarios so that comes to her. Mm-hmm. With the sexuality, it's more about conquest on the side of the men. And so it's more about owning that act of submission. You have to be reluctant. If you're engaged, if you desire this, and the men know that, there's less desire there. They want to be the ones to kind of... The men are more sexually aggressive. Like, they are coming there. They want to kind of, like I said, own that act of submission. Mm-hmm. So you have to be reluctant, right, to be ordered to be valuable. But at the same time, if you're always reluctant and that resistance is part of this sexual script, then how can you ever tell if someone is really refusing? Because it's expected.
Yeah.
So we're going into this story, and we have a young woman who... cannot express these desires. She might not even know anything about, gendered relationships, men, romance. They're very secluded. She would be expected to read, conduct books to figure out ways to be more virtuous, mm-hmm. More of this perfect, virginal, good wife. Yeah. So these books, in and of themselves, are pretty radical because they are talking about love and seduction and sex. They're also... very didactic. Haywood is always going to have a lesson in it for these female readers. And through Fantomina, and I'll just call her Fantomina because it's a little easier.
Yeah.
Through Fantomina's different exploits that she gets up to, Haywood is, being like, hey, this is how relationships kind of work, but also here's the danger. Mm. And so they're very much teaching these young women who are just the literacy rates have increased over the 18th century. So they're reading these new things for the first time. And it's kind of interesting to see, this is a book written by a woman specifically for a young female audience. Okay. And so they're very much written for the purpose of teaching, but also... entertainment. I'm sorry, this is a lot of background.
Oh, I'm totally, enthralled. Tell me more.
Oh my gosh. So, another thing about Haywood is she is a professional writer. She's not the first professional woman writer, but she's one of the most prolific. Mm. So, she's actually making a living from selling her novels and plays and translations.
Good for you, Haywood. Yeah.
For sure. And so, but she's also very market savvy. Mm. So, she will... as she goes on with her career later in her life, when the desires of her audience change, her writing will change to keep up with that. Mm-hmm. So she's a very smart, very savvy business person. Okay. And so back to Fantomina, she goes and she meets with this man that she's met before in her real life as a wealthy young woman of marriageable age, of desirable, marriageable prospects. Mm-hmm. And she meets this man, Beau Plaisir. His name means good or beautiful pleasure. Mm. So I don't know if you can kind of guess where this is going.
Okay.
So she meets with him, and he's handsome and accomplished and gives her all this attention. And she absolutely loves it. And at the end of the night, he's okay, let's go.
Yeah, but he thinks she's a prostitute, I guess. Is that in this moment? Okay, yeah.
Yes. So he does not know, obviously he's met her before, and this is going to be a big theme in the novel, the expectation of what this woman is supposed to be versus what she's presenting. Mm-hmm. This guy just can't, it just doesn't click for him. This man is going to eventually see this woman have sex with this woman in multiple different disguises and performances and have absolutely no idea that she's the same person. Like, he's got no idea.
What?
Yes. It's insane. Fantomina is, hey, I'm already engaged with my gentleman benefactor, and so I have to meet with him tonight, but here, come to these lodgings tomorrow, and we can continue our conversation. So the thing about this young woman, calling her Fantomina, is that she has so much wealth and privilege that she's like the only person who's going to be able to pull something like this off. She's also in town in London with her aunt as part of, Haywood's didacticism of her teaching. This is kind of a warning of what can happen if you don't have a responsible chaperone. So she's with her aunt, and her aunt is obviously not keeping a very good eye on her because she's able to...
Yeah, my aunt was not letting me pretend to be a prostitute, for sure. None of that was going on.
As it should be, as we're gonna find out with Fantomina.
Yeah.
But, her mom is off in a foreign country, so she's like... running through London, just doing whatever she wants.
Yeah.
So she rents this house, and she's very secretive about it because if anyone finds out that she's, meeting with this guy in private space and, doing all of this unladylike behavior, that could really mess with her marriage prospects. So she's putting herself firmly in the danger zone. And so she invites him over, and he sees her table and how well it's set up, how richly it's all set up, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford to, spend the night with this woman. And so they're talking, and obviously she's young. She's a teenage girl. She's never been alone with a man like this. She has no access to, how a sexual relationship would start, how any of this would happen, and so... she's just expecting to, have conversation and be flattered and be talked to, in a way different than she's accustomed.
Yeah.
And I came here for a reason. I know what that reason is, while you might not fully know what that reason is. There's a moment in a lot of Haywood's works where the consent is very dubious. It's set up as a seduction, and so the readers of her time are going to look at this and be like, obviously, if you invited this guy over to this place and this is what you wanted, this is what you signed up for. Yeah. But she's so young, so naive, she doesn't really know what's going on. She is intentionally not revealing her name or her birth or anything like that. In fine, she was undone, and he gained a victory so highly rapturous that, had he known over whom, if he had known over whom, scarce could he have triumphed more. Her tears, however, and the distraction she appeared in after the ruinous ecstasy was past, as it heightened his wonder, so it abated his satisfaction. He could not imagine for what reason a woman who, if she intended not to be a mistress, had counterfeited the part of one, and taken so much pains to engage him, should lament a consequence which she could not help but to expect. So, it's very dubious here. There's force, there's ruinous ecstasy, and so it's very... dubious about the consent here. And this happens throughout the books. Later on, as she's engaging him in different disguises, she intentionally puts herself in his way, hoping that this, very aggressive sexuality is going to happen to her again. Okay. Because that's the only way that, this is her first experience, and so this is all she knows. And so afterwards, he tries to give her money. And she's really angry about this. And you ruined me, but you're going to pay. You're going to pay with your love. And so she decides, I'm going to be compensated for this no matter what. And since she's already a wealthy woman, obviously she doesn't need his money. And so she's decided that she's going to have him, his attention, his love, his desire. And a very large part of this book is about male inconstancy. They always want something new after they've had a woman, after they've had this moment of conquest, they get bored very easily. And so they move on. She tells him, I am not actually a sex worker. I'm a young woman from the country. I just was curious. And he's he just can't comprehend, why would you do this?
I'm wondering myself.
I'm I'm like, Fantomina, girl, there are better ways to do this.
Yeah.
But, like, she's
so
means.
naive, yeah.
Exactly. And she's got no one really looking out for her. And so, because she has so much privilege, so much money, so much freedom of movement, she can go and do all of these schemes. And Beauplaisir gets tired of her, moves on, and decides to go to Bath. He's going to take a vacation. He needs to get away from London and all of that. And so she decides to hire a coach and follow him. And so on the way, she decides she's going to be a maid now. And so she, changes her appearance. She puts on a very thick country accent. She apparently, according to Haywood, this girl is the most gifted actress since Meryl Streep.
Oh.
Like, people do not recognize her. Apparently, she's very good at acting in disguise.
Yeah. Maybe I was a little too harsh on Beauplaisir at first. I mean, she sounds like she's pulling one over on everybody.
Honestly. But at the same time, I'm like, dude, you really don't recognize this woman that you keep having sex with?
Yeah. I was thinking about it, and I listened to, actually, a friend of mine has a podcast called Didn't Read It.
Awesome.
They did a Fantomina episode, so I was kind of like listening to it, and they were talking about how it would be there should be like a mini series now.
Yes.
On this, because I can just imagine like the humor that you could get from Beauplaisir, just like each time not picking up on who it's the same woman, buddy. She has not changed.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. If any show producers or execs are listening to this, please. We need a Fantomina.
We're ready.
We need a Fantomina miniseries. Built-in fan base right here.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the time we're just coming off of the Gilded Age, and what's the really popular one?
Ooh.
The Regency one where they're always banging.
Oh, Bridgerton.
Yes, Bridgerton's having a moment.
Exactly. And it's so fun watching Bridgerton and knowing that people were actually getting up to that.
Really?
Like, obviously in a much, much different way. Like, they're really all out there. We have a very modern sense of everything there. But, they're having masquerades. They're doing crazy wild stuff at the masquerades. That's why I love the 18th century, because, like, you realize that the people who lived 300 years ago, they're just like us. Like, they have a different mindset, they have a different cultural context, but, like, they're still going out, having fun, like, looking for all the same things that we're looking for. And plus, it's just so fun.
Yeah.
Like, these plots are so fun.
Yeah.
Like,
they're all over the place because of, like, the constraints of society, or what your role was supposed to be was so fixed. But you still are a human being, and you might find a way to get around some of this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, like, the plays, they're so raunchy. They're having so much fun. There's a lot going on in the 18th century. There's masquerades, there's pirates, there's hijinks, there's kidnapping.
Okay.
Anything that you could want, you're going to find it in an 18th century novel. Especially if it's written by a woman.
Okay.
Like, we don't need to bring up Samuel Richardson and Pamela.
Okay. Not here for this.
not here.
Okay, I think there's a couple things I'm thinking. I want to talk about amatory fiction, but it also is reminding me, which maybe this is all tied together, but okay, so I just rewatched Sense and Sensibility.
Love it.
Which is like my very formative story for me. And it's just kind of reminding me of the scene where Colonel Brandon is explaining about he had this ward, and maybe I allowed her too much freedom.
Yes.
Spoiler alert, if you have not watched or read the story, she runs into similar troubles as I guess Fantomina might end up with. Yes. But yeah, it was, I allowed her too much freedom. It's like her, in Fantomina's case, it's like the aunt's supposed to be watching over her, but in this case, it was supposed to be Colonel Brandon was supposed to be watching this girl, but she runs off, maybe with Willoughby, but
yes,
it might be too much of a spoiler.
Oh my gosh, that is exactly where Fantomina is heading, unfortunately.
So talking about amatory fiction, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
Okay, so talking about amatory fiction, and then I think that kind of leads to Jane Austen, who was 100 years later.
Absolutely.
But what is it about these stories that draws you in, that you think is really relevant to literature overall? All that kind of stuff.
Great question. There's kind of a scholarly debate about the novel. Obviously, we have Defoe and Robinson Crusoe, but it doesn't always have the same characteristics of a novel that we would kind of see in a modern context. So, like, a lot of people, when they're teaching the history of the novel or doing, like, entry-level survey courses, they'll go with Richardson, and they'll go with Pamela as being the first novel. And it makes sense because Pamela, it's a lot about interiority and perspective of the character.
Yeah.
And it's very long. There's lots of chapters. Of course, it's an epistolary novel, so they're all letters. But I really think that the novel, in its current form, starts with Haywood. It starts with these very early amatory fictions because we have characters, and usually they're characters who we don't really get to see a lot of. We get to see young women taking on the world, and we get to see them in a bunch of different situations and things to deal with. We get to see how they protect themselves from, scheming parents, there'll be wards of the men, like in Sense and Sensibility.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in amatory fiction, these wards are not like Colonel Brandon. Like, they are not honorable men. They're seeing these young women who live with them in their house, and they're, it's not a good situation.
Yeah.
But you see these women, and they, a lot of times, like, of course you're going to have a novel about a woman who's ruined. It's very popular. Men especially love to write about that. But a lot of these women, they get to have a lot of agency, and they get to have a lot of power. Not power within the confines of the society that they're living in, but a lot of internal power. Like, they get to have a lot of agency, and like I said, they're going out and they're getting kidnapped, but they're getting out of it. They're getting, they're dealing with all these men who have nefarious designs against them. In Haywood's first novel, Love and Excess, same situation. The Count d'Elmont, who is the main male protagonist in the story, he finds this young woman who needs protection. He's the daughter of one of his friends. Ick. And so he decides that he wants to seduce her, and so he goes to her bedroom, but she shoves cloth into the keyhole and prevents him from getting inside.
Good job, girl.
So there's a lot of moments like that, but I think that a lot of the plots, a lot of the reason for writing that we have now to kind of explore these different ideas, to teach people about things, to make money, all of it is starting with amatory novels and Haywood. And like I said earlier, we have increasing literacy rates, and we have decreasing price of things. And so the material of the book is becoming more accessible.
Yeah.
And so we're getting stories that are tailored to readers that have never been served before. And so a lot of these books are for young women. And so they have a lot of intrigue, a lot of romance, and while the romance is like not what we think of with a modern romance novel, like, it's not about the falling in love aspect. It's about, sex and desire, and what does this mean? How do you have these long-term relationships with someone who essentially owns your identity? And so I just love them so much, and there's just so much there that's interesting and that you can dig into.
Yeah. What do you think if Haywood is calling into question about the state of, like you were saying, okay, you can get married to somebody, but now this person is basically your boss.
Yes. So Haywood's very interesting because we don't actually know too much about her. She's a little bit of a mystery. We have her works. We have all of that. We know that we think she had 2 children, but we don't know what happened to the father of those children. Her maiden name was Fowler. Okay. At some point, she added the Haywood, but we don't have any marriage records for her. We don't really know what's going on. We know that she worked as an actress. And back then, being an actress was a big no-no.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, they were seen as sex workers.
Yeah.
And so she's actually coming from a perspective of people have, viewed her, have seen her, have devalued her work as if in the same way that they would with a sex worker. And so I think she's coming with a lot of background that a lot of other women are just not going to understand. I mean, she's supporting her children in a time when it's not easy for her to have a traditional means of income. Yeah. And so she's selling her ideas, her words, and caring for her children.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of gender dynamics in the novel and her novels. She has some interesting translations and works that you can think about with colonization, because at this time England is colonizing everything.
Everybody, yeah.
And it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
And so she is she's critiquing a lot of the culture. And I think in this work, and especially some of her other novels, she's critiquing rape culture a lot. Like, she's really breaking down this idea of resistance as a requirement. Resistance is almost like foreplay.
Yeah.
But the problem with that, like I was saying earlier, is, how does anyone know when a resistance is real and when it's, a part of this script?
You can see, you see all of this filtering down into things that we do now and we have now. What is that song that got in so much trouble for writing it? Hold on.
Oh my gosh, is it the Robin Thicke song?
Yes, the Robin Thicke.
Oh my gosh, Blurred Lines.
Blurred Lines.
Yes.
That song is only like 12 years old and it's all the same thing.
Yes.
I mean, it's got a catchy hook, but I think they stole that from someone else. So, anyway.
For sure. No, that's absolutely brilliant. I'm so glad you brought it up, because people have actually written about that, about Blurred Lines and its connection to rape culture.
Yeah.
Mostly about how to talk about it, like, in the classroom. So, great catch.
Oh, great. I love pop culture. So.
Me too, surprisingly.
Yeah. Yeah, but all of it filters down. I mean, I was thinking of the Taylor Swift song, Blank Space, and she says, boys only want love if it's torture.
Yes.
And that's sort of what this is about, too. Once Plaisir, what's his name?
Beauplaisir.
Once Beauplaisir has, made his conquest, he's sort of over it.
Yes, and she does it multiple times.
Yeah.
And this happens many, many times. And it's really interesting also how it kind of evolves for her, because her second persona, Cecilia, is this young country maid.
Yes.
And so Haywood even makes a point that Fantomina is feeling so grateful that the only other man in this house is an old man who, is not going to be able to, physically catch her and harm her.
Good.
And so the only amorous violence, quote unquote, that we're seeing is the one that she wants, which is from Beauplaisir.
Yeah.
And so he sees her, he catches her by the leg, pulls her into his lap, and just decides to start flirting with her, to get aggressive with her. And this is what she's expecting, because so many working class women do experience these things. And so Haywood, on the one hand, is delving into, obviously, all women are in danger, especially when you have these dynamics going on. But especially a working class woman, she has no protection. She doesn't have privilege, can't just pick up and leave when she wants. This is almost an expected part of her job. She's a maid, but she's also in danger all the time from the men who are around her.
Yeah.
And so she kind of Fantomina takes advantage of that, because she doesn't know how else that she's gonna get with Beauplaisir. We do see in this novel, which is really interesting, she's into this. That persona, Cecilia, she kind of only understands this script of sexuality based on this moment of dubious consent, of violence, but also at the same time, what's kind of radical about Haywood is Fantomina is into it.
Yeah.
She is into it. She is enjoying having this sexual relationship with Beauplaisir, despite how it started. She really wants to continue it. She's going to make sure that he pays with that love that he owes her.
So thinking about it a little bit, who would you recommend Fantomina to?
Great question. Obviously I would tell anyone to read Fantomina because it's great. But I think definitely I'm going to go with Haywood's vision. I would definitely recommend it for young women, women in general, but I think during that formative time, at least for me, since I read it when I was 20, not 14 or 15 like Fantomina, but it felt very validating reading about this character who's written 300 years ago,
Yeah.
and she's still navigating the world in the same way that I navigated when I was a teenager. Like, when I was a teenager, I made mistakes. I was naive. I was running around and trying to fall in love and have all these experiences.
Yeah.
And luckily enough, I lived in a time where I didn't have all of this danger and all these consequences. It felt very comforting to know that this is maybe a part of girlhood, like having to learn these things and learning how to navigate the world. And so I think if you read it, it can really resonate with you.
Okay. Very cool. I want to point out, you're having a sip of the tea. I want to point out to the listeners that you are wearing earrings that are guillotines.
I did. How to represent 18th century.
Okay. I love it.
So I've gone to some conferences before, 18th century lit conferences, things like that, and you will never find more guillotines.
Oh,
okay. It's a thing that 18th century scholars wear.
Okay.
Sometimes just a little cheeky nod.
A nod to the
cheeky nod to the time, the turbulent time, and obviously, Fantomina is 50 years before then, but the seeds of discontent were there. Class is very important then, as well as gender.
Yeah.
And
I wanted to give you a chance to talk about your work or shine a spotlight on something you're excited about, that kind of thing.
Awesome. I don't have much work out there. I'm not published yet. Fingers crossed.
Okay.
But I have been working on different scholarly articles about Haywood. I love to read and write about Haywood, about 18th century writers. My PhD plans are on pause at the moment.
Okay.
I'm working at VCU. I'm a pre-health advisor, and I love working with my students. I'm working with 18, 19-year-olds. They're first-year college students, and so definitely the age range that...
You could tell them about the Fantomina.
Yes. Please. I feel like my math and science heavy students probably wouldn't appreciate it, but I will still plug it anyway.
Okay, good.
Please just read Fantomina.
It's only 77 pages.
Exactly. It was quick. It's so quick. Yeah, I'm really excited about... What am I excited about? I'm honestly just very content right now. I love what I'm doing. I love my job. I love that I was adjuncting before.
Okay.
And so I basically never had any time ever for anything.
Yeah.
And so it's been really nice to have this more of a work-life balance. I think sometimes when you're a teacher, people think of what you're doing as a vocation. And so a lot of times people are thinking, oh yeah, you should be class planning, grading, thinking about your students all the time because that's what's best for them. And that, obviously that's great. We have wonderful, wonderful teachers out there who are putting their all into it and can give all of that. But I think for me, it's been really nice to have a little bit more of a balance, to really have a team and a supervisor who understands that you can't work like that for very long. You're just going to get burnt out. Yeah. But yeah, I'm really excited. I hope that maybe some people who are listening will pick up, Fantomina or Haywood. She has many, many other novels. Yes. One of her novels, Betsy Thoughtless, one of her later works when she's probably in her 60s. It's more of a traditional novel. It's longer. It's got chapters. There's more character development than in some of the amatory fiction. But there's a scene in there where the two main characters are talking in a garden. She's being proposed to. And there's no way that Jane Austen was not reading Eliza Haywood. Okay. There's definitely some influence in there. So if anyone out there loves Regency novels, loves Jane Austen, Haywood is like her wilder, older aunt who has lived through it. She's lived through it. She knows what's going on, and she'll tell you about it.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for coming and sharing. I think you've definitely opened the door to me and hopefully listeners on this very early portrait of a novel, I guess. So
thank you. Thank you.
So
I
much.
appreciate you inviting me, and I appreciate being on here, and I can't wait to listen to the rest of the episodes that I haven't listened to yet.
Okay, good. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And the tea is lovely, so thank you so much for the tea.
Of course.
Cheers.
Yes.
And when I hit... Thank you for spending some time with me and my guests for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email, at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.